Good morning and welcome to Sunday Coffee. Joining, per usual, my co host, the benevolent TK Eppley, who's also the future governor of Virginia, whether he likes it or not, because we know our pal Stoney's going to help make it happen. Today, we're going to be talking about why you should just embrace the suck, or in the more politically correct way now, embracing the grind. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Very well. How are you doing?
Oh, we didn't get to talk about this in the pre-show, but I gotta say, pretty crappy right at the moment. Yesterday would have been my younger brother's 44th birthday, and so it continues to hit me because I always felt that there would be a time to where him and I could have reconciled. He just wasn't ready. He he had a lot of issues, and I had to kind of love him from afar because of those issues. But I felt that there would be a day, and that day never came. So it's definitely, which is really interesting in that the missus and I 1 year ago yesterday we were learning how to make whiskey, and here we are a year now, and we're fully licensed, passed all the inspections, and it just so happened to be on the day of what would have been my brother's birthday.
Well, happy angel birthday to your brother.
Yeah. So it definitely continues to hit me when I think about it, because you always hear the people say, well, don't let tomorrow get in the way of today.
Right.
And that certainly reminds me of that. So I always take an opportunity now, no matter what, is while I want to be better tomorrow than I am today, the only way I get better tomorrow is if I make sure I live today to its fullest possible extent, because otherwise, don't have to worry about tomorrow.
No doubt. But again, that's part of that embrace the grind, right?
Mhm.
And there was the old saying, like, you don't have to like it, but some days you just have to do it.
Yeah, the thing that I tell my kids is do the things you have to do so that you can do the things you want to do.
Correct. Yeah, I think I've used that with my kids, but also other adults, right? I mean, I think when you start talking about, like, hey, how am I going to be successful in life, whatever that is, right? There's a certain level of effort you have to put in everything. And once you understand that what that level of effort is, I think, and you meet that, you can be good. Right? But once you understand what that level is and you attempt every day to exceed that level of effort, that's when you can become great.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't want to embrace that suck or embrace the grind because it's hard. But you don't get big muscles by continuing to just lift 100 pounds.
Right.
You don't get better by doing anything easy. You have to struggle. A diamond's not made without struggle. Great wine's not made without struggle.
Squats are a great metaphor for life, right? Stuff's gonna weigh you down, right? How are you gonna stand up?
Yep.
Right?
I can't do any
By the way,
squats.
squats over, everybody. Don't skip leg day.
Yeah, I can't do any squats. Too many knee surgeries. So I do the leg press.
That's all right. You gotta put yourself under strain somehow.
Yeah, I'm just going, I used to like squats, but after 6 knee surgeries, I like my knees better than I like the squats.
I don't like you.
Yeah, it was going, because I can feel it when I excuse me, when I would go down. I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm going to pop another ligament here. Let's go do the leg press.
I'm not, yeah, exactly. Like I said, I think that metaphorically and physically, putting yourself under stress and strain is what makes you better, right? And it's that, creating a habit, right? It's, I've had people, when I really got back into lifting and got back into, saying, hey, I'm going to, as we joke around, I'm going to live to be a couple 100, 300 years old. I don't want to be in the wheelchair getting the trophy. I want to be out there sliding into the gates and, hey, did you see what I just did, right? I think that you have to put yourself under stress. Right? It's one of the reasons I enjoy going to the gym and everything else, aside from the health benefits and everything like that. In other words, like, hey, if you're lifting, especially when you start to get more lean muscle mass, your metabolism is going to become faster. Right? And there's a whole lot of positive health benefits from that, not least of which is mental acuity, right? If you want to say we're going to embrace the suck or embrace the grind, it becomes a lot easier when you're physically fit.
Absolutely.
I think it's a 360 approach to that.
I think the easiest way to embrace that grind is to learn how to humble yourself. Because then, like for me, at least now I'm doing jujitsu after doing martial arts for 20 plus years, and I felt like I was, pretty good. I am motivated by the aspect that I'm not very good right now.
Right.
I'm embracing the aspect of almost every person I roll with is better than me and beats me every time. I'm embracing that.
I think I'm a big believer in that, right? I think that my opinion is that whatever you do in life, go find the next bigger pond.
Yeah.
Right? If you start to, bang up against the side of the fishbowl a little bit, it's time to go find the bigger one, swim with bigger sharks, right?
Yeah.
And I have a bunch of my friends that are really into jiu-jitsu, and they're always attempting to roll with better people, right? And you should, right? I think that's a life skill, right? And whatever you're doing, go find people that there's two things that you have in your life. You have aspiration and inspiration. Right? Look at people who've achieved what you're attempting to achieve, and that becomes your aspiration. And then in hanging out with those folks, right, and learning from them, and there's a certain mentorship that takes place, especially in martial arts and things like that. Where by design, you're meant to give to other people, and help the next generation show up. Then it becomes inspiration, right? And those two things combined lead to greatness.
Absolutely, and where I think people, and we've talked about it, life's not necessarily complicated, it's just complex, and you got to break down those.
It's not hard, it's just complicated sometimes.
All right, and so what I started doing, I've done this throughout, I feel like I've done this throughout my entire career, in that how do you define what a win is? Sometimes the win isn't that you got the actual win against whatever it was, because if you're going up against people that are far better than you, it's what does that win mean? Because you're likely not going to beat that person or whatever it is, straight on. So when I had a private lesson about a month ago, and I went to my teacher and I said, this is what I'm noticing all of the colored belts are doing. They're able to grab a hold of me and they're getting me into their guard. And I know these passes and I know what those counters are. And so I'm like immediately stuck. They're in full mount and, it's game over pretty quickly. So I want to, what can I do next? So he teaches me this thing that's called Marcio's pass. And I go, all right, now my goal is, can I now just not get submitted?
Right.
Can
I turn it on somebody, right? Can I turn it on somebody with something they weren't expecting because of my neophyte status?
Right. And so I definitely gassed out, but I didn't get tapped out.
Right. Yeah.
All right. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm done. Because hey, I'm 46 years old and I haven't done anything like this but I was able to like, okay, they couldn't break my defense. I was able to hold there, which would technically be considered like stalling, but hey, I need to make sure I had this. Now, when I was comfortable, I would get up and I could get them into the pass, and if I did it correctly, I could get into side control. I didn't necessarily stay in side control very long, but I was able to do it.
Right.
So to me, that was my win. Then I started, well, what happens then in life, when all of a sudden the person doesn't do what you wanted them to do? Which for me, I'm like, okay, I want to be in that person's guard. Well, when I went up against some bigger guys, well, they're bigger than me. So they basically were able to, they don't want to be in my guard. They want to immediately, bum rush me and basically, I mean, bully's not the right word, but kind of bulldoze me over. And
Yep.
all right, now they're in side control tonight. And then I'm going, all right, now what do I do against the bigger person? So my last private lesson, I'm like, all right, Carter, now what do I do against the people that are bigger than me that are just immediately like they can out muscle me because they can break my guard. Now what do I do? So he teaches me some things. So I'm going, all right, my win at this moment is just, can I defend and not get submitted? Now, eventually, I would like it to be to where I can win, and thankfully against other white belts, I do pretty well.
I think that's another good metaphor for life. You start out like there's, the immortal words of Pitbull. I either win or I learn.
Yep.
There is no failure, right? And I think during that, hey, your wins now are learning.
Yeah.
And then so from that, what base of knowledge can I compile that will eventually lead to the final goal? And that's when you start saying, hey, I'm going to embrace the grind, right?
Yeah.
And when you're rolling and things like, you're going to get thrown around. You're going to, it's going to be uncomfortable, right? And somebody's going to try to stretch your elbow from one end to the other, to get you to submit. But that's things like, I think how do you recover from mistakes or failure, right? And how do you do that? Because a lot of it isn't just in a vacuum where you're attempting to achieve some goal, right? We're very interdependent on other people in life for the most part, and whether it's for other people's approval, other people's assistance, other people to hold your hand, right? Because I don't care who you are, sometimes things are big and scary, and you don't want to step off into the unknown, right? Because you don't know how far you're going to fall, because you don't have a knowledge base, you can't quantify risk, right? And everything in life is about managing risk. And how do I do that? How do you do that in relationships, right? I can be galactically stupid in how I approach relationships sometimes. I try not to, but every now and then, what do you drag into the ring from your past? What do you expect from the future? When those two things collide, you do dumb shit in relationships, right? So how do you mitigate that, right? How do you control things? But you think about, like, one of the things I think, in the case you were talking about with martial arts, is it's like you learn how to control your emotions, right? And I think it's relatively easy for an internal mechanism, like you're controlling your emotions to get a positive outcome that the person you're not emotionally connected to that person, right? You both have the same goal in mind, not to lose, right? And you notice I didn't say not to win, because a lot of times in life, things are a draw, and both people can walk away saying they won, and there's a positive outcome for both, but it's not, you got 3 points, I got 2 points. Right? Well, think about that in relationships, right? That's much harder, because you're not doing things in a vacuum. You have a historical basis with that person, and if you want to have a future with that person, you are going to do dumb shit, right? How do you cut that down? And what happens when you do something really stupid, right? How quickly you can recognize, yeah, that wasn't a really good decision, that was really bad, and then go, the part of the mitigating the risk is to look at yourself, look at the other person, and acknowledge it, and work through that. Whether it's, hey, I'm sorry I said that, I'm sorry I did that, those types of things.
Yeah.
That is, when you talk about embracing the grind in life, it's about mitigating risk. And I tell young SEALs or younger SEALs now when they're retiring that, look, you have these big ideas about everything you want to accomplish in life, but every business, whether you want to start your own business, you want to go work for somebody else, never forget that the best skill that you have is your ability to effectively mitigate risk, because you've been doing it your whole career. That's how, like, if you look at some of the things we do in the fashion we do them, under normal circumstances, people will be like, that's crazy. I can't believe you were even trying that. But if you walk it back to where we start with somebody that doesn't know how to do any of that skill, and in most cases, a relatively short period of time, get them confident, right? So they can use that skill at work. It's all about mitigating risk to create. And that, I think that's the underpinnings of embracing the grind.
Yeah.
Is you have to have some measure of safety. And in order to do that, you have to mitigate risk. And I think a lot of people, when they say, hey, I want to go do X, they just start running towards X, which is an admirable goal, right? Because, hey, I'm thinking, but that's where you get motivated, right? Motivation doesn't last, discipline does. And part of that big discipline piece to embrace the grind and work through things that are really bad over time, right? You have an expectation of how long it should take to do something, right? And when it takes longer, when you get knocked down, when you have to get back up, all those things that you feel like, hey, I'm taking little steps back, I'm not taking big mother ass steps forward, that's when you really have to rely on, hey, how have I mitigated the risk? Right? Why am I here? Right? And you have to be self-effacing, and sometimes you can't answer those questions. And that's when it becomes really hard to start messing with your head. Right? But the quicker you can say, I'm exercising the discipline I need, right? It's just taking longer than I imagined, right? And that's, I think, the bigger part where people walk away from bigger goals is when things take longer than they imagined, right? It's a question of impatience usually and arrogance. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And some people just like, I want what I want, and I want it now, right? And so in that's when the discipline wraps it up. And that's what you say, like, you keep going to people going, hey, I want to learn something new today. Because in that one thing, that might be the key.
Absolutely true. And I think so. Let's put it in the business perspective. we have business goals. Like, part of the win is, hey, what does it take just to earn your first dollar? Then
Right.
what's it take to break even? Then what's it take to have a profit? And then what's it take in order to enable other people to have profit? you can't.
Did I have to spend to earn my first dollar?
Yeah. Right. It's you break down, but enjoy that journey for what it is. I mean, I can tell you like so many things along the way that the missus and I made mistakes in starting up our business. But it took us 1 year and 3 days to open and be able to legally make liquor. The president for the American Distillers Institute says he will buy dinner to anyone that can get it done in less than 2 years. So as many mistakes as that we made along the way, we are still faster, so to speak, than this guy saying, I'm going to buy you dinner if you can get it done in less than 2 years. Because we embrace it. Okay, every challenge, you're never going to solve it on your own. So I always say to her, and others, well, we have enough brain power, we can solve any problem. Let the problems come. All right.
Yeah.
Don't get upset at the problem because someone made a mistake. And if you dwell on that, then you're never going to solve it. So,
Right.
one of the first ones that came about was we found out that the way in which the city classifies where we were, under the permitted uses, a distillery was not one of them, even though a brewery is. So that really kind of was a gut check because we were hoping to be open in May, and that was in March. So, okay. This next problem, which happened at the same exact time, if you don't get this paperwork submitted by this Friday, then you won't be on the docket until the May review. But you got to, this was in order to get you on the April one because you've already missed the deadline for March. So and that was on a Tuesday. I'm going.
Thursday at 3 in the afternoon.
Yeah, I'm going. All right, well, let me take a look at this thing, and I look at it and I go, oh my goodness. So now I had to learn all these zoning laws, and because you have to write this big, huge reasons as to why you should have this in there. And then, oh, by the way, I had to get it signed by the landlord, and I'm in New Orleans. So going.
Other than that, you don't have any problems whatsoever.
Yeah. So we wound up getting all this stuff done. We go through the April meeting, which then they approved it, which then goes to the May meeting, which we got approved, no problem. But I had to figure it out. I'm like, okay, I could have gone, oh well, let me just go back to the landlord and go, hey, I have an opt out, so I'm just gonna use the opt out and get out. And I would have had to start the process all over again. But I'm like, no, we can get this done.
You work with it.
Yeah. There was, I'm not the handiest of people. I don't know how to do a lot of things like, plumbing, electrical. I could do a little bit of electrical, but I don't really know a whole lot of those things. Just never had to. And I always wanted it done right, so I'd go find someone that could do it right. And
I got a guy.
yeah. So one of the things was, had to put up a ceiling tile because right in one of the drop ceiling in this one part of the area, got to put in a ceiling tile, and because one and a half ceiling tiles was missing back in the one electrical part. I'm like, all right, well, guess I'm gonna go buy a ceiling tile and figure out how to cut this thing, which I did, which wasn't difficult. But I'm going, but I asked it was a young lady at the Menards, which is like a Home Depot.
Yeah.
I was like, what do you use to cut these ceiling tiles? And she goes, oh, just any X-Acto knife like thing, just do that. You just kind of score it, and it'll break off in that part. And I'm like,
drywall.
yeah. And I said, oh, okay. And then someone had asked me, like, why am I so comfortable asking any of the people there, no matter who it is, for help? I'm like, because I don't know the answer.
How do you learn?
I don't know the answer. I'm not gonna. What am I gonna do? Like, I need to make sure I have all the right tools to have the opportunity to be successful. I could have gone back and like, all right, now what do I do?
Those people are there.
Yeah.
They are all handy, as you say.
Yeah. And so I can just go, all right, well, if you don't know, then ask. Because you have to have the opportunity to be successful. And if you don't have the right tools, then you're not going to be. So I went in there and I'm like, all right, I started looking at this thing and it's got all these different, pipes that are going in. And I'm like, it's only me here. I would need additional help. So I took a little bit of a shortcut and I said, hey, the worst case scenario, fire marshal's not going to like it. And he's going to tell me to redo it. Because I just went and like, all right, I basically turned it into like a big U. Because as I started finding out and trying to do this, I couldn't really get things quite right, mainly because it was just myself and I still have a bum hand at the moment. So I was really trying to do it one-handed. So I did it. I took a picture, sent it over to him, and he's like, hey, good enough for me. He goes, but the building inspector may not like it. But from a fire perspective, you've covered what I feel is necessary. Check. Building guy was same way. He's like, no, it's good enough. Because it's only 3.5 inches from the wall. And in terms of the width, the length was 18 inches. So that's the only space. And the whole reason for that ceiling tile is that in the event that a fire does happen, you need to be able to trap the smoke enough so that the sprinkler will go off. If there's not enough clearance there, the smoke never gets trapped and goes all the way to the ceiling, and the sprinkler will never go off because it goes all the way up. That's the whole reason for the ceiling. So I'm like, cool. But again, all right, it's just a problem that had to be solved. I could have been like, this is I could have made any excuses to say no, I can't do this. And I think that's a big part that people don't want to embrace the problem solving and the joy of making progress?
Well, I think some of it comes down to fear, right?
Mhm.
I think there's in life there's two types of fear. There's fear of failure and there's fear of success, right? And people that have fear of success that's a very hard thing to change, because no matter what you do, however, if I'm trying to help you or somebody's trying to help you, whomever is trying to help you, you are always going to find a way to put little impediments in your way to trip over it, so you can actualize what you believe, right? Fear of failure, we can work on that, because once you say, hey, look, take one step. What happened? Nothing terrible happened, right? Let's take a few more steps. And so you can show people that it's better to be trepidous instead of fearful, right? Because if I'm trepidous, I'm going to take advised steps, right? And I tell people and you've heard me say this before, and I was a friend of mine is the first person I've heard it. I've used it a lot. I'm only one decision away from the right one, right? Because while everybody else is sitting there doing nothing, trying to be perfect, I want to take one step in what's a generally accepted. This whatever happens here, it might not be perfect, but it's not going to be catastrophic. Like you said, I'm trying to hang a ceiling tile. What I'm doing is not perfect, but I know I'm moving in the right direction. And in doing that, when you take that metaphorical step and take action somehow to try to affect positive change, your worldview looks, the curvature there, things that you didn't know before are revealed, right? And so now you can lead and make on a better decision. And I might have to adjust a little bit here and there, but I'm not saying, oh man, I got to turn around. And maybe there is a time where I've got to turn around, go back to this step, and then take a parallel path. It's going to lead to a better answer. But people get, there's analysis, paralysis by analysis, right? And people sit there and do anything. I truly believe that in combat, quite a few people, and some of the folks I've talked to, they've gotten the Medal of Honor because they just go, whatever I'm doing here right now, I'm not doing anything. I might get shot when I stand up, but if I do nothing, I'm going to die, right? And that's a big, because of the catastrophic potential outcome. But think about that. If I sit still, if I'm inactive in my thought process and in my doing, I'm never going to be successful. Whatever I'm trying to do, I will not achieve. It will die. That dream will die. In order to do that, I have to be a person of action. And I'm going to get up and I'm going to expose myself to the things that could potentially hurt me the most, right? And that's damaging your ego, damaging all the the emotions that are attached with failure and success. And how do I get there, and how do I move past that? And yes, sometimes it's going to take demonstrably longer than you imagine, right? And today I still get, there's people that, and I don't think, because I know you're no stranger to this emotion, is like, I get furious at some people just because I know that, actually, I'll say it this way. I get furious at some people because what I perceive they did or did not do, either to help to my detriment or to not help me be successful, they had other options. And they chose to exercise those other options largely because they're selfish. Period. Right? And then I was like, I had to deconstruct that a little bit more. And that very well may be true. But the bigger problem, and I think this is, when you kind of have to look at yourself, I really want to get better, I want to move forward, and it's really hard, is to go, I'm blaming them for not being me. Like, we're the roles reversed. I know what I would have done because I know who I am as a human being, right? Good and bad, right? And it's that thing when we were talking, you try to mitigate the bad and accentuate the good, right? And I don't care how old you are, where you're at, if you're not going to do that well every day of the week, because we're emotional human beings, right? It does, but I do think that, hey, go out and make that big mistake. It's not making the mistake that's the problem, it's how you regroup from it. And understand that certain things are out of your control. And no matter if you're never going to be able to control that thing, then you've got to do what it's going to take to be successful in another avenue. Right? And your plan might include some unintended stops along the way to get where you want to go.
Yeah. I'll give you a great example is the part of that, because I know this, but maybe not everyone out there. I love riding a motorcycle. I thoroughly enjoy it,
Never do yet.
and I no longer have one. Mainly, and the whole reason is this: I can do everything right on that bike, and someone else could do something wrong, and I'm dead.
Yep.
Even though I did everything right, and I just went at that particular point. I said, you know, as much as I like this, it's no longer worth the risk. Even though I've never rode without a helmet and full dress down, stuff. Sometimes leather, whatever it was, body armor.
Right.
But I went, that doesn't matter. Like even when I did ride, I knew, hey, I'm either going to be doing less than 30 miles an hour or more than 60. And people will always ask me why. I said, less than 30, I might have some bumps and scrapes, but I can walk away. Over 60, I'm not going to care because I'm going to be dead. It's in between. I'm not going to like it. That's where I'm going to have a lot of broken bones. Surgery's going to happen. So, but now I just went, it's just not worth it at all because the risk is too high.
Right. Actually, the reward wasn't great enough.
Yeah, right. That's a better way of saying it. The reward.
I think that's like, it's at that point, yeah, we quantify risk, and you quantify the risk, and you're like, the reward isn't worth the risk I'm about to take.
Yeah.
Right. And I think when people say, oh, the risk is too high, I think in order to have a positive mindset and a mindset of achievement is that the reward is not worth the risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that causes you to continue to try to mitigate risk somehow.
The juice was no longer worth the squeeze.
Right, exactly. And that's, I think when people start thinking about this, it's what mindset do you have about it? Is my mindset one of accomplishment? And if it's of accomplishment, then you're always looking at the achievement piece, right? And you're balancing the risk against the achievement, not balancing the achievement against the risk, right? So that, yes, my outcome, while positive, I've got to expend so much energy on risk that I'm not going to do it. Right? So I'm not a motorcycle person, and for the exact same reason. Right? I mean, anything can, it's just like this, I get up every day and I'm like, I'll see something during the day, I'll hear something, I go, what is wrong with humanity? Right? And not the typical things that you see on the news or anything that people I shake my head at now, right? I have a really good friend of mine that he's a big cyclist, and there's nothing more than that guy loves riding bikes. In fact, this year he did this race across America for charity, and he was like in the chase crew. Next year he's actually going to do the race. He'll be part of the racing team.
Oh, nice.
Right? Another retired SEAL. I worked with him at Victory Strategies. He's a great dude, and he was telling me that one of the rural parts of Virginia Beach where everybody goes and rides because there's very few cars there. And they're staying out of traffic, so they're doing their piece to stay out of traffic. And all they expect is like, hey, the people slow down. It's out in the farm country, so it's not like anybody's doing speed racer stuff out there in their car anyway. But there was this one area they were going around, and they went around, and like all of a sudden, they're a big group of people, and all of a sudden, everybody's tires are going flat. They're falling off their bikes and everything. Well, somebody had thrown out like tacks or nails or something out there across the street, and it can only be for one reason, right? And it was, they could only surmise because there was always a farmer out there that on Sunday mornings would bitch because 30 riders would go riding a circle twice. They go, like, they're on this big loop, and they do this big loop twice before they headed back into town and kind of went off their separate ways. They couldn't prove it, right? But what causes somebody to go, I'm going to intentionally hurt someone because I don't like them riding in this area, right? And it's, what I feel and who I am is way more important than you, right? And that is, to me, I go apoplectic at that, right? Because I want to find those people and just be like, hey, you don't like it, do you? Right? Come here, keep walking. Like, get a little closer, because how can you do that to another human? Right? Just like, hey, I don't like somebody's riding a bike. Maybe I can really get them all hurt and have them pile up on each other if I throw nails or tacks out into the street. Right? And you see more and more of that on things like people losing their minds over nothing. There was a video on YouTube, once on social media, and some lady went berserk because she thought that this big pickup truck was parked too close to her car.
Yeah.
And she lost her mind. Like, they videotaped it because she's like, you're not going in. She hops up on the hood of the car. Like, you're not leaving until the police get here. It's like, hey, at what point am I the bad guy if I put that car in reverse and back away and let her slide off the hood? Right? And then who's, I mean, the couple in the truck was paralyzed.
Yeah.
And they took the camera and went down on either side of the truck. That truck was within the parking lines. She just didn't like it because she had a little Prius and they had a big truck. So now her opinion now becomes the fact. Right? And I think that is you're going to run into that all the time with people when you're trying to achieve. It's like, hey, and a lot of it is people don't like that level of achievement, right?
Yeah, no, it's so odd to me that someone would go to those extremes. And I'm not entirely sure what I would do in that situation. Because my instinct is I would likely have gotten out of the car and pulled the person off, going on, I'm protecting my property. Because someone jumping on the hood of your car, the hood's not meant to hold weight.
Well, it has actually nothing to do with that. I would think that, that's, and here's the thing, it's hard today, right? Because everybody's got rights, right? You hear the term "my truth." There is no truth. There's opinions, and then there's facts, right? You might have your reality, and we all know crazy people, right? They have a skewed reality. But when you start, Jordan Peterson, I don't know how many people follow him. I love the guy. I don't agree with everything he says. He's well thought out. He's a very intelligent man. And somebody talking about how we're as a nation, as a society, we're much softer today. We are, and he's like, it's by intent, right? And he talks about everybody. He says, especially men, because boys need to learn how to be. They should be monsters, and then they should learn how to control it.
Yep.
Right? We're not in that society. We don't live in that society anymore. Right? We want everybody to be, oh, hey, you're over there. Yeah, I know. Oh, I've got to listen to your beat. Here's the thing: if you're yelling and screaming at me and banging on my car, and I do something, in most cases, it's like the NFL, right? The person that's doing the bad thing never gets the flag thrown at him. It's the person that reacts that helps us out. Our problem, I think, is we've skewed the reaction. Right? Is that you can come out and you can say anything you want. Right? Even like last year, I think it was Antifa. I can't even keep track. It was protesting in DC last year, and it was out in front of the Willard Hotel, which I love going to the Willard. And there's an elderly gentleman walking by just trying to get from A to B, and they basically clubbed the student, knocked him down. Right? My thing is, where's law enforcement? Like, where are other people that are like, that's not correct? Right? And this thing that, hey, I don't like what you're doing, so I'm going to be the loudest person in the room to shout you down and part of the cancel culture, that freaks me out. Right? As a society, that's like, no, that's not who we're meant to be. Right? And that level of, the concept of, so much about things that just aren't true, use a Reagan line, right? That you've now said, no, this is the way it is, and there's no other opinion allowed. Right? That's whether it's society or you as an individual, if you are like, hey, I'm unwilling to listen to anybody else's opinion about things that really you're not going to be successful in life. Right? And you're going to need other people to help make you successful. And I mean, they're going to have to prop you up because you've lost your head.
This aspect of cancel culture is just so. One, I think it's completely wrong. But it's still so bizarre to me as to you don't like it. I mean, because I just go, where does it stop?
Exactly.
All right. Is it good? Because it may sound ridiculous, but I go, what happens when too many people think eating bacon is wrong? Is the fact that I ate bacon on my hamburger, am I now gonna lose my job because all these vegetarians are out there and they're like, sorry, eating meat is wrong. Now, people think that's ridiculous, but how's that any different than me saying, even though I didn't, I've never voted for President Trump, but if someone comes out and said, I support President Trump, They're trying to get them fired from their job.
I know.
So
I disagree with your opinion. And, at one point, the man ran for president, he won the election, and you didn't like the consequences of the election because you wanted the other guy to win.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but I think the other thing is, whether it's, especially in politics, I think, I've said it before, I think whether it's Republican or Democrat, they're just opposite sides of the same coin, shouting at the face. Right? And, we get to a point now where, you've got how many news channels have to fill up 24 hours a day of air?
it's basically air because it's not good content.
Well, you've got to occupy the airwaves for 24 hours a day.
Right.
Right? And hey, it's like being a weatherman in San Diego, right? The most boring job on earth. Hey, it's gonna be 70 and it's gonna be a low of 60 in the morning, it'll be a high of 72 in the afternoon, then it'll be sunny, and the marine layer is gonna burn off at 8 in the morning. And you can go back to sleep for the rest of the day.
Yep.
Right? No news station stays alive by like, hey, there's no wars, everything's great, we're all getting along. Conflict is what drives that content. Whether you think the content's good or not, conflict drives that content. And we are in the golden age of content conflict. More so than ever.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? And when I see elected officials at the highest level, whether it's in the House or the Senate, and the way they talk about each other and to each other, right, is inexcusable. And it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. Right? Because we're at a point where it's like nobody's trying to get anything done or accomplished to move the country forward. They're just trying to win. Right? And who are they trying to win for? Right? I think those are bigger arguments. And you can melt that down into businesses as well. Right? We're bigger companies. Like we both have some friends that work at AWS. Right? And Amazon hires 330 employees a day, roughly. Right? And when you start getting these massive organizations, the thing is like people walk around the HR manual and they want to be aggrieved because it's turned into bureaucracy. And once you have something that turns into bureaucracy, number one, it's hard to fire people. Number two, if people know the rules, they do it. But now, like you said, hey, if somebody votes for a certain person, I want them fired because I disagree with their opinion. Right? They're like, no, not even a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at what point could I potentially be in jeopardy of losing my job because I have to live a carnivore lifestyle?
Oh, I know. Well, I think at some point, especially when you start talking about things like, I'll use the pandemic, and I'm very vocal about this. This is more about obesity and people being out of shape than it is than the virus itself, right? If we had expanded as a nation the amount of effort on the airwaves to push exercise and a healthy lifestyle that we pushed on the vaccine, those two things in conjunction probably would have led to much better outcomes.
Sure.
Right? But there's no money in exercise. Actually, there is. It's $1 billion business, but not for the people that are,
Well, that's spread amongst way too many people. Whereas pharmaceuticals, like how many pharmaceutical companies do we really have in this country, and how many of them are producing, any type of vaccinations? 3,
right.
4.
But I think this is with the pandemic now. We've gotten to this point where I think it highlights everything has to be all or nothing. Right? We're not in society now like this where you get these people that walk into HR and say, hey, that person triggered me because I know they voted for Trump. Right? Or whatever else is triggering them that day. Right? That at what point do we go back and we look at the founding documents and go, wait a second, your rights stop where they start infringing on mine. And you don't have to like who someone votes for. You have to respect the opinion they voted. Right? I mean, that's the problem. I mean, I think one of our bigger problems is voter apathy.
Yeah.
Right? And you get people now, like everybody, I think we're getting more people voting because it's a time where people are so, hey, I believe X should happen or I believe Y should happen. There's nobody coming together. And I think we've talked about this before, especially with the political piece. Reagan knew that he couldn't get reelected without passing some legislation, and he needed Tip O'Neill's help. Tip O'Neill, at the time, understood that he would put in peril Democratic control of the House if he wasn't appearing to work with a wildly popular president at the time.
Yep.
Right? And then the same thing happened again with Clinton and Newt Gingrich. And they had this certain level of mutually assured destruction because they were motivated, they became motivated to try to help the country for their own interests, right? But they wanted to get control of things. In losing that, and think about that in business, right? That when you get there, you have to be able to constructively disagree, but understand that at the end of that disagreement, at the end of the discussion, at the end of whatever meeting you're having to decide the course in the future of moving on, that especially in the executive team, right? That once it's over, everybody's like, this is what we're doing. And when you walk out of there, everyone has to be in sync, right? And it's the one person that's out of sync that continues to cause the bus not to go as far as it possibly could, right? And there's that old saying, like, we might all be on the same bus, but we're not going to the same place. The fewer people you can have going to different places, especially in business, the better off we are, right? Now, if you look in politics, it's a battle for my soul, right? That's all I can describe it. It's like because people can say it's good or it's bad, right? But in the net, it's a battle for my soul. And this thing of like, if you disagree with me, I don't want to hear from you. I want to hear from everybody. But don't be surprised when I go, wait a second, that's not true. Right? And
Well,
be informed.
I think this is the part that people really don't take into consideration. If everyone thinks exactly alike, there can be no innovation.
I totally agree with that. Nothing great in human history has ever happened without dissent.
And in one of the I think it's called the Innovation Code Book by Jeff McGrath, who is the dean of innovation at the University of Michigan. He has a great book, and they've come up with it's called the Michigan Model of Leadership. And you got these colors, and you put these different things. And red is the engineer, yellow is sage, green is artist, blue is athlete. He goes, if you have everyone that's just an athlete, you're not going to work. If you have everyone that's just an artist, it's not going to work. Sage, like, you have to have as close as you possibly can an equal amount of each personality kind of in the room in order to be innovative. You need conflict, and if you don't have conflict, you will not be innovative. And so everyone is just, and from a political aspect, just Republican or just Democrat, not getting anything done. And the fact that we are canceling people out that we don't agree with, there's some things that, hey, to a certain extent, if you're espousing harm on someone, I'm like, yeah, I don't think you should have a platform because you're calling for violence.
I agree with that.
Okay, but if I'm going, this is my opinion that I want to do A, B, and C because this is what I feel is best for me. That didn't hurt you. It did nothing to you because I'm saying this is what I'm doing for me. And the fact that you don't like that, then you always have the option to walk away. You don't have to go forward. And it's the same thing that when I'll take it back to martial arts. The best thing to do is when there's a conflict like that where you may have to get into a physical altercation, I have the opportunity to walk away. Now, if that person prevents me from being able to walk away, then that's when that aspect, like with Jordan Peterson says, now you should, remove the threat from the chessboard immediately.
Right. I was listening to, I was like dorking around on Instagram or whatever, and and Jocko came up, and it was somebody, he was on somebody's podcast, and it was a short snippet, and they were talking, he was talking about, he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Oh, yeah.
He's a bad man when it comes to that stuff, right? And they were talking about, like, finally, he was like, hey, 90% of the time when people want to get into a fight, and I truly believe this, I believe this my whole life, I have the opportunity to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
I also have the opportunity to run away, right? Because, and especially like when you look at somebody like Jocko that has some notoriety for being a tough guy, I don't care who instigated it, who whatever, if he puts his hands on somebody, there's going to be litigation.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because they're gonna make a big deal about it, right? So, he walks away, and there's only one occurrence where he's literally gonna fight back, and that's if you put your hands on him.
Yep.
You drop, you don't, right? Because I'm gonna do it, but even then, it's gonna be proportional. I'm gonna do what I have to do to get you off me, and then I'm gonna disengage. Right? And I think everybody equates being a tough guy to basically walking in the room and belting people around. Right? I think some of the harder things to do is to look at people that are like that basically need to be taken over your knee and spanked, right? Because that's usually that person, right? They have no emotional control whatsoever. That to the point where it's like, I'll be out and stuff like that. People be talking, it's like here's somebody talking next to you that's so wildly crazy that you're just like, okay, I gotta stop like even trying to listen to that because I'm gonna disagree, which is fine. But like today, like in today's world, if I go, I don't think that's okay. That person who is so sure of themselves that the way things are working in the world is the way they want, and then, they want them to work the way they want. They're gonna shout you down. They're gonna make a scene in the restaurant or whatever public place you're at, right? And this level of I have the right to push my opinion on everybody, because that's really what we're saying, in a way that's very demonstrative, either verbally or in the case of some people, they won't put their hands on people, they want to throw stuff at them, they want to walk up and, take a hat off somebody or not, they're wearing a t-shirt that they don't like, throw stuff on, right? All of those are forms of assault.
Oh, yeah.
And so what are reasonable people supposed to do? Right? They're supposed to ignore it. They're supposed to not go out. They're, you can't go to this part of town, that kind of stuff. Well, no. Get a handle on that and think, what's the ultimate outcome, right? It is, do we as a nation decide that we want to kind of keep the wheels on the cart and move forward productively? Right? And I think my personal opinion is I think that some of this is a discussion about America's place in the world, right? And how other countries either, you go to some places in Eastern Europe and they worship the thought of America and they understand it very well. Why? Because they lived under Soviet rule for decades, right? And then you look at some other nations and they are to the point where they're like, hey, we don't want that, so-called American exceptionalism, right? And as a nation with our elected officials, what are we getting? Like we get the government we vote for, and what have we asked for? And I think those are the discussions, right? And you have to be able to be reasonable about it and say, I can disagree with it, but how do we get there? I mean, I think that's one of those life skills. And certainly in business, things don't turn out right. You're supposed to have a great quarter. You don't have a great quarter. Well, how do we get here, right? And there's, at some point, there's empathy. Well, we always talk about this in two things. There's empathy and accountability, right? You can be grinding, but there's empathy and accountability. At some point, if you're not good at holding people accountable, don't be a leader. Self-select and walk away and go do something else.
Yep. Well, right? and that's where I was, where I've gone back and forth a couple of times, and I'm pretty convinced that. Backing up when we talk about this aspect of being innovative or just embracing the grind. At one point in time, I was like, no, I'm not a believer in universal basic income. Now then I went, I'm a believer in universal basic income, but now I'm pretty back on the other side. If I give people everything they need in order to just live a comfortable life, then they will never do anything to try to be better because it's been given to them. It's not earned. So I'm back in the camp of against universal basic income because I don't think they'll do anything. I think most people just want, if they're comfortable, That's it. If they could go and play video games all day long and eat McDonald's, they'll do it. So I'm against again the basic income or universal basic income because I think that will be the quickest path to the United States no longer being the country that others want to come to.
I don't disagree with that at all. I'll go a step further. When you start looking at the gun violence problem in the U.S., right? And this is if you walk back universal income and you say you go to the roots of like what are some of our biggest problems in the U.S. People will say, oh, you go to Chicago, where they're shooting each other, all these, the big major cities that have gun violence problems, right? And lately, they're mostly trending on being the most violent year or two that we've had in the history of this nation. People go, I want to take away the guns. Well, the guns they're wanting to take away are not the ones that are actually doing all the killing, right? They want to take away long guns. Pistols are the big contributor, right? Is that the problem? No, guns are not the problem, right? There's hundreds of millions of lawfully owned firearms in the U.S. If lawfully owned guns were the problem, then you'd know about it, right? Here's the problem. You have mental health problems and you have truncated hope problems, right? If somebody, when you look at in a lot of these urban areas, people can simultaneously live the best day and worst day of their life. Meaning that they know that things aren't ever going to get worse, but they also understand that it's never going to get better. And once you do that, you start truncating hope. The delta between what I can be and what I am is what makes people get up every day and want to do better and want to be great. And everybody defines greatness in different ways, right? Great to somebody might be making that $70,000 a year basically, so they can take care of their wife, they can take and they can have their own place, right? But there's a sense of contribution. Once you take that away from somebody, in a lot of cases it's multi-generational now, right? Where they're like, hey, no matter what I do, it's never gonna get better and it's not gonna get worse. Then putting your gun to somebody and shooting them isn't that big a deal anymore, right? And so there becomes emotional issues, mental health issues, and everything else. All of those are really hard, difficult things to deal with, right? But even if we pulled in Australia and took away all the lawfully owned firearms, do you think that's going to solve that problem? Do you think that the people that are unlawfully using a firearm are going to just stop, right?
No, they'll just go to something different. I mean, again, this just gets back down to that trickle down effect of
They'll
like,
use
hey,
bats, they'll use knives,
right?
It becomes stabbing capital of the world, right? That kind of thing. And so I think in anything, whether you're in society, and we want to empower Congress to try to deal with these problems, right? Or I'm running a business. What are the things that are stifling the ability of my people in the organization to be successful, right? Well, if you tell somebody, hey, we're going to give you a universal basic, and there's no thing, you said, hey, here's your ceiling, here's your floor, they're right at the same place. That's the emotional problem that universal basic income draws on, right? And we can have an argument about income inequality and other things like that, but it can't be the politics of envy. Right? It's like, what are we going to do as a nation to solve some of these problems? Well, first off, people can argue about it, but what's public education providing? Right? I don't want to answer the question. I'm just saying that you have to deal with, where does it start? It starts with educating the next generation of people. Do I agree that teachers should be paid more? For the most part, yes. Right? But here's the caveat. They want to consider themselves white collar folks, and they want to be thought of as, hey, we're doing the best we can for the next generation, and I want them to, right? Schools should be cathedrals of learning where people, they're being taught how to think critically, and they're being taught how to learn. Now, there's a whole other show in how we got to where we're at, right? From the turn of the 20th century to create more workers for the industrial might that we were creating as a nation. But we're here. But when you look at where we're at now, where most teachers, most school districts in America, they're all unionized, which I don't generically have a problem with that, right? Am I a big favor of unions? In most cases, no, because we've got so many federal agencies that deal with all the problems that were why unions were created in the 20th century to begin with, all the workplace safety and all the other stuff, right? But the fact that teachers will not submit to professional testing to prove that they are competent, and they're just blanket no, that's a problem for me, right? So that's one thing. And then you move through the systemic things that we have as a society. Like, if we're not starting at ground zero, taking the next generation of Americans and making them as best as we can critical thinkers, right? Then how are we going to solve problems 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now? Right? What's the nation going to look like? And everybody, especially in elected office, especially at the federal level, they're just trying to get elected. What did I do in the last, every indicator that they have is a lagging indicator. What did I do even in the last 18 months that's going to cause you to want to click a button and vote for me again? It's not the Eisenhower interstate system where, hey, we're, think about what it took in the early 50s to say we're going to commit all the resources to link America to each other, right? I mean, before that, it was a series of dirt roads. I mean, there's two big spires of rock. I think it's in Kansas out there where the Pony Express Postal Service. That's where they knew they had to turn left to get from one city to another, right? Well, what's the next big idea? Right? The next big idea can't be to break the country financially because we want people to go to zero emissions tomorrow rather than on a confident glide slope. And the reason we're not going faster, even though we are removing more carbon from the atmosphere than any other nation on Earth, is because of politics. But people won't get in the middle of the room and say, what's the sensible glide slope to take to where we're doing what's right for, because you keep belching those crap into the living. What are you breathing in? Right? We don't have to be pie in the sky about it, but what are you breathing in? But at what point are we willing to drive the bus into the ditch repeatedly, like we do, because I want my way?
It's really interesting when we talk about like the aspect of zero emissions. Today, I want to drive a car cross country. I know there's a gas station roughly every 30 miles.
Correct.
But those gas stations today don't have an electrical charging station every 30 miles.
Right.
And I'm also not able to, it takes me a few moments to fill up my gas tank. It does not take just a few moments to recharge my vehicle.
Right.
And there's people that don't want to fly. So they want to drive. They want to drive cross country. Now we're basically, like, if the laws of New York and California on the path that they're going, that would mean they're only going to keep people in New York and California. They're not gonna leave, nor are people going to come in because, well, they have a gas car, not an electric.
Right.
I think New York said that by 2025, no car can be sold, no new car, or the better way to say it, all new cars, I think in 2025 must be electric, I think is what the.
It must be EVs?
Yeah.
That'll be interesting to see how that support mechanism works.
Yeah. I think that's what they said, it was 2025. I could be wrong. Someone could fact check it, but it was something like that.
Right.
I think it's going to be a really big challenge because.
I think there's a lot of big challenges. Even now, some of the ardent folks or green people, they're starting to realize that you can't have a discussion of clean energy without discussing nuclear, right? We as a nation have so much natural gas that it's is it perfectly clean? No, but is it cleaner than gasoline and diesel? Absolutely, right? So again, it's about being on a positive glide slope, and that's anything in your life, right? I mean, I say it about the nation, but hey, you're not going to be perfect. But how am I walking my way towards perfect? or instead of saying more perfect, perfecter, right? How many
Are you still in the pursuit of excellence?
Right, and that's where it's in most things in life. Hey, there's very few things that are 100-0. Touching kids, 100-0, right? Don't do it. If you do it, we want to have a special place for you, right? And you're not going to like the outcome of what goes on there, right? But in most things in life, you are making decisions. And think about everything you do in your personal life, with your family, with your kids, and everything like that. It's like, hey, we're balancing resources. Well, as a nation, we have to balance resources, and you can have crazy people stand up there all day long and say, the planet's going to end in 13 years. I know that's not the truth, because if it were, and you went to refinance your house tomorrow, they would not give you a mortgage. The mortgage would be 12 years.
Right.
Right. Period. It's the same way with sea level rise. Right. Even if you take the 10-foot number, which is generally accepted number, and I'm not saying that we're not having a negative effect on the planet, right? What I'm saying is, when people come out and they make these wild statements, put things into context in something and this is a business tool. It's like, hey, there's things I can't imagine that that this may be true. So let me break it down into something I can understand. Well, if you're going to say the sea level is going to rise 10 feet in 10 years or 12 years, whatever the most catastrophic time frame is, then most of the East Coast has gone to the Appalachians, right? Nevada, or Reno, and Las Vegas are now beachfront property.
That one I'm okay with.
Well,
I'm not okay with the East Coast part going away, but the West Coast I'm perfectly fine with.
How many insurance companies, how many people, how many analysts do they have doing the actuarials for everything they insure? And if that were the case, there would be an addendum, right? That if this happens, you still owe us the money. Or they wouldn't write a mortgage for a minute longer than that does. And this is why, like, when people get life insurance, the older you buy it, the more expensive it is, because there's certain numbers that they want to recoup to be profitable, right? And people get emotional, right? And the thing I found where people get angry when you say stuff is when you're like, yeah, I don't care about the emotional part. What's the logic piece behind this, right? And I think from a climate perspective, like, for example, people get really bummed out. You're like, hey, we've committed not to build any more coal-fired power plants in the U.S. The big problem is China and India in particular have not, and they're building them at a breakneck pace. And because of that, and there's this thing called the jet stream, that all of that is going to get dispersed around the world, right? And it's one of the few times where I'm like, look, we have to address what we're doing to the planet. Everybody has got to be in this, right? And if you're not, and everybody wants an exception, right? Well, I'm a special case. I'm a special flower. I don't need it. But people want that in business. They want that in life. I only want to do 410s because I've got something special I need to do on Friday, and I'd like to work Monday to Thursday. Well, can I afford as a business to have everybody work Monday to Thursday? I don't know. I've never looked at it, but let me look at it, because I don't want everything I don't need to be rigid in rules, but I can't be completely flexible with exceptions. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that, kind of thing is when you're telling people you want them to be better and you want them to embrace the grind, I think it works better. Actually, I'm not gonna say I think. I know it works better if you're a standards-based organization, not a rules-based organization.
Yep. Here's the framework, and which is the standards.
Right.
Play within the framework. I don't. I'm not looking at, because I care about the results. I don't care necessarily about how you got there.
Right. I don't care about the dance moves.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I do care in certain cases because there's financial ramifications to what you do. If you're running a business, you've got to be concerned about the financial ramifications. But with that being said, I want you, when you talk about people, I'm going to be great. Well, for a younger person, 25, 30 years old, what is great mean? Right? They're making strides. They're doing good things, and they're usually individual contributors. Whether they're an engineer, software guy, marketing person, whatever, they're learning their craft. They're learning, and they're trying to learn a business structure, and they're trying to learn how to play nice with others from 9 to 5 every day. If they're doing that, they're achieving that level of greatness for where they're at. And it's up to leaders to identify what their talent could be, right? And it's that old thing. It's like treat somebody as they are, and they'll always be that. Treat somebody as you can imagine them being, and they'll exceed your wildest expectations. Right? And if you're not, I think as a leader, part of embracing the grind and managing the grind, right? Because that's your job, your grind manager, is to walk in every day and empower people to think about life, business, themselves, everything in a manner they never have, and give them new ideas. But more importantly, not put constraints on them that force them into an idea box. Right? They say, well, hey, this is what the outcome. Right? I'm a big believer. Okay, why do we do that process that way? Because that's how you get discussion. That's how you get that dissent. Well, because probably one of the answers is always, like, we've always done it that way. Right? And that's the thing. Well, okay, I'm not telling you it's wrong what we're doing. I just want to know how we got here. Because I want you to start to think. And when you think about what we've done, now you can start to imagine a different future or a better future, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be different, but how can I be more efficient? How can I get more out of what we're doing in life, both from an emotional standpoint at work, where people, they want to show up, they want to get there early, right? Because just to see what goes on.
Right.
I was probably the first 5 years I was a team guy. Like, I just couldn't wait to go to work because every day something was going to happen, good, bad, funny things. But I was learning something. It was like, the last few years of your career, you're like, all right, I'm not saying I'm done, but I'm done, right? Because you're not learning as many new things. And as I look back, as I've been retired for quite a bit, I probably missed some things because I was like, hey, I'm just going to do this, and I already know I'm going to retire. And it's not like you're mailing it in, but you're kind of sliding into that, and you start thinking about the future. Right? Well, how do I action that? Right? And I think the way you action it is to stay present and create what we call the long now. Right? There's a society out there called the Long Now Society, and they think about problems that are going to be how to solve problems, 5, 10,000 years from now, and what and they contemplate that, right? You can create that in your life and your thing, because you've got your tactical goals. Here's what I want in the next, 12, 24, 36, 48 months, and then here's what does a grand life look like for you? Right? What is that? What does a grand life look like for a business?
Right.
Like, on our best day, what are we going to do and why? And you're as a leader, you're not the owner of all the good ideas. In fact, you should be the biggest facilitator and cheerleader for the ideas that can, because like you said, you're not a plumber, you're not an electrician, right? What I do, I'm not an avionics engineer, I'm not a structural engineer. But you know what? I can ask good questions to get people thinking and want to be better. And not be better, but to do different, like to imagine things being assembled differently, both from a people perspective and the physical objects that we build and sell, to the point where everybody's like, hey, I'm free to think. I'm free to design. I'm free to ask questions, and I'm free to question. Right? And I think that if you can create an environment where those things are freely discussed and they're open, and here's the thing, we tend to do it where I work. We're sarcastic with each other, we joke around and stuff like that, right? But it works for us.
Right.
It might not work for somebody else. And I think the bigger companies you get, the more people think you can be offended, right? We're small enough to where culture is really important. As we're hiring new people, we've hired a couple of folks in the last week or two, or actually now probably last month. They're great culture fits. They jumped right in. They realized it was okay to be themselves, right? And I think as a leader, if I do nothing else, as a business leader, it's to allow it. Well, I got to do two things. One, I've got to effectively manage the resources we have, right? And that's the nuts and bolts of your two things is like you manage the business, you need the people, right? So I have to effectively manage the business, being the resourcing and things like that. But then in managing or leading the people, if you want them to think like they've never thought, you got to get out of their way and let them know. And more importantly, let them know it's not only okay. I want to hear from you. Right? And that makes the grind more tolerable, because at the end of it, they can say, hey, I changed that. And like I said, we're small enough now where anytime anybody does anything different, we can all get around and look at it and celebrate it.
Yep.
Right? That's why I probably buy everybody lunch once a month, especially after we've been out on the road. There's a couple of us that go out and we're demoing products, and we get all the praise because we're out in the public eye, is to come back and really, you know, be genuine and affectionate towards everybody, because we're not big enough, you know, it's not the 2 or 3 of us that went out and sold. There's everybody else that made this possible, right? And I think kind of lastly for me is when you walk, part of helping people embrace their personal grind and the overarching one for work is, hey, don't be afraid to tell people you appreciate what they did. Right? And that could be at the end of the day, hey, yeah, good night, Bob. All right, man, I really appreciate it. Appreciate everything you're doing for us. Right? Because you're never doing it for me. Right? We're doing things for each other to be ourselves better. And now I think you've got your individual grind, you've got corporate grind. As a leader, I can mitigate some of the corporate grind just by putting people in a positive frame of mind. Because they're not going to be in a positive frame of mind every day. But I want them to know when they're not, they're coming here and it's a safe place. We're going to work you hard. We're going to have fun doing it. And your opinion is going to be valued. And that really, in my mind, sets up everybody to be successful long term.
Absolutely, well said. Well, my friend, it's about that time.
It is.
I know you got a workout to do, and so do I.
There we go. Exactly. Everybody have a great week.
Yeah, have a great week, and see you next Sunday.
Yes, you will.
All right, everyone, take care.